Mateo Rodriguez kept his eyes on me from across the rink. He was an imposing figure in his hockey uniform. Tall and strong, he seemed to proclaim with his whole demeanor that the rink belonged to him. Today, I, Olivia Bennett, was supposed to be training alone, practicing my triple axel. I had booked this time months ago, specifically to avoid the unwanted proximity of hockey players. However, fate had other plans. Mateo was there, too, practicing his shots for the big game tomorrow. He approached me with a note from his coach, a sly smile on his face, his dark hair falling slightly in his eyes. "Our team needs this time," he said, handing over the note. I rolled my eyes and skated to the other side of the rink. "Whatever you say, just stay away from me." "I'm not going to bother you, but don't bother me," I replied coldly. His grin widened. "Of course, Ice Princess." Mateo was one of those guys who always got his way, time, attention, even girls. But I wasn't one to give up that easily. I could feel his eyes on me as I warmed up. It was like a burn on my skin, making my heart beat faster. It irritated me and, at the same time, strangely, I liked it. As I lifted off the ice, doing a triple axel, I saw Mateo looking at me, one eyebrow raised slightly. He was clearly impressed. "Not bad," he teased, skating closer. "How about a competition? You versus me? First learn to stand on your toes, and then we'll talk," I countered, although I couldn't help but smile a little. He chuckled again, and then suddenly added, "I like you, Olivia. You have character." These words caught me off guard, and for the first time I seemed to lose my balance. Mateo obviously noticed my confusion, but he said nothing, only skating to the other side of the rink. Now I had to concentrate, but his presence was in the way. Every movement he made was distracting, every word seemed to leave a mark in my head. I continued my attempts, but on the next jump I lost my balance and fell with a crash to the ice. A sharp pain shot through my left shoulder. Before I could stand up, I felt strong arms lifting me off the ice. It was Mateo. "Are you okay?" His voice was quieter than usual. "Yes," I muttered, though the pain was intense. "You need to see a doctor," he said, not taking any arguments. "I can handle it," I said stubbornly, but he wouldn't let go. "You can handle it?" He leaned in slightly, his eyes meeting mine. "Why are you always so stubborn? Why are you always so persistent?" I snapped, my heart pounding. Mateo smiled, but there was something new in his gaze, not just confidence, but genuine concern. In that moment, I realized he wasn't who he was pretending to be. And maybe that was even more dangerous than his confident smirk. Mateo led me to the edge of the rink and carefully sat me down on the edge. His hands were still on my waist, as if he didn't want to let go. Our eyes met for a second, and I saw his gaze soften. "You're really not going to the doctor?" he asked, frowning slightly. "I told you I was fine," I said, trying to sound confident, even though the pain in my shoulder was a constant reminder with every movement. "You're being overly dramatic." "If you're being overly dramatic, I guess I'll just stay here and watch you practice," he replied with a smirk. "Don't you have anything better to do?" I quipped, rolling my eyes. "Maybe so," he admitted, "but I'm more interested in watching you right now." I felt my cheeks begin to heat up, but I quickly looked away so he wouldn't notice. He was so annoying with his cheeky charm. "Do whatever you want," I said over my shoulder and tried to focus on my workout. Mateo was indeed there. He wasn't skating, he was just standing at the edge of the rink, arms crossed over his chest, watching my every move. His presence was more noticeable than I would have liked. I tried to ignore him, continuing to practice my spins and jumps. But his gaze was literally burning into me. Every time I turned around, he was standing there, still wearing that smug smile. As I caught my breath, he came closer. "You're amazing," he said quietly, but with such confidence that I couldn't help but glance at him. "You have an interesting way of distracting people," I said, but my voice gave me away with a tremor. "I did it on purpose," he winked. "Think of it as my way of testing your mettle." I snorted, but couldn't help but smile. He wasn't what I expected. There was something genuine, almost touching, beneath his cocky leader facade. "Okay, but seriously," he said, sitting down on the edge next to me. "Are you always this fixated on training?" "If I want to win, then yes," I answered honestly. "Sports require discipline, don't they?" "You're right," he agreed, but then added, "just remember to live. That's important, too." I looked at him. "You can't tell me that. You have the whole rink to yourself." He laughed, and it was infectious. "You surprise me, Olivia. You're not who I thought you were. And you're not who you pretend to be," I replied before I could think. His smile softened. "Maybe you're right," he said, looking at me seriously. "Maybe I want to show you who I can really be." My heart sank. Was he pretending? Or was he serious? We looked at each other for a second, and the silence seemed louder than any conversation. Then I turned away, trying to hide my embarrassment. "If you want to show me something, don't disturb my practice first," I said, getting up from the edge and heading back onto the ice. But as I took my first step, I felt his eyes following me again. And this time, it was completely different. It was as if he was not only looking for a way to win me over, but also to show me that he was ready to be near me. Perhaps this day would be the beginning of something more. But for now, I decided to keep my distance. Or at least try. Over the next few days, Mateo became an integral part of my training program. It was both annoying and nice. Every time I went to the rink, he was there. At first, I thought he was just teasing me, but gradually I noticed that he was actually paying attention to my movements, trying to understand the intricacies of figure skating. "Aren't you spending too much time here, Mr. Hockey Captain?" I asked one day, practicing a spiral. "Maybe," he replied with a smile. "But I like watching you skate. You make it look so easy." "Easy?" I laughed, sliding toward where he stood. "It's not easy, it's months of training and pain." "It still looks amazing," he said, leaning closer. I felt my cheeks heat up again. Reacting to his compliments like a schoolgirl had become an annoying habit. "Stop flattering me," I muttered, turning away. "It's not flattery, Olivia," his voice grew quieter. "You really are amazing." Our eyes met again. There was something special. Deep. I could feel the tension between us, but I pushed the thought away. "If you're going to spend so much time here, at least study something," I abruptly changed the subject, hiding my embarrassment. "Study?" He raised an eyebrow. "So I can become a figure skater?" "Oh, I'm sure that would be fun," I chuckled. "Try doing at least one simple jump." Mateo quickly put on his skates, clearly ready to take on the challenge. He stepped onto the ice with unexpected confidence, but a few seconds later he slipped, almost falling. "It's not that easy, is it?" I couldn't help but laugh. "Of course you're right," he muttered, standing up. "But I still have time to learn." "Time? For what?" I raised an eyebrow. "To keep up with you," he said with a sly smile. "I can't let you be better than me at everything." "Better than me?" I crossed my arms over my chest, looking at him defiantly. "You heard me," he smirked and stepped onto the ice again. Mateo began awkwardly copying my movements, and although he looked amused, I couldn't help but admire his tenacity. We spent the entire evening together, rehearsing and laughing. The more time I spent with him, the harder it was to keep my distance. Behind his bravado was a kind and sincere man. He tried to understand me, to help me, even when he didn't know how. At the end of practice, he suddenly said to me, "You know, Olivia, you change me." I looked up at him, trying to understand what he meant. "You make me want to be better." "And not just on the ice," he continued, looking me straight in the eyes. I froze, not knowing what to say. But deep down, I felt the ice inside me begin to melt. The next day, as soon as I stepped onto the ice, I felt the familiar tension. Mateo was already waiting for me, standing at the boards. He was without his usual hockey gear, which made his figure even more impressive and distracting. "Well, princess," he said with a grin, adjusting the sleeve of his sweatshirt. "Today, I decided to set myself a new goal." "What is it?" I asked, starting my warm-up. "To understand why you push me away like that when you clearly want me to be with you." My movements slowed. His words were too bold, too sure, but I couldn't deny that he was right. "You think too highly of yourself, Mateo," I replied, trying to remain calm. "Maybe," he agreed, starting to move along the edge, following me. "But you can't deny that you're interested in me." I turned to face him. His eyes were blazing with challenge, and that only added fuel to the fire. "And how can you be so sure?" I asked, lifting my chin. He moved closer, too close for comfort, but I didn't pull away. "Because you can't hide the way your cheeks flush when I'm around you," he said quietly, but loud enough for me to hear. "Because your gaze lingers on me longer than it does on anyone else." My heart was pounding like I'd just landed a series of triple axels. "You see things that aren't there," I said, trying to sound confident, but my voice was shaky. "Really?" His hand suddenly touched my face, brushing aside a stray strand of hair. The gesture was so unexpected that I didn't have time to protest. "You can deny it all you want, Olivia." His voice was quiet, almost a whisper, "but there's more to us than just ice." I tried to take a step back, but he didn't give me the chance, moving closer. There wasn't even a centimeter between us now. "Maybe it's time to stop running," he continued, looking me straight in the eyes. "I'm not running away from anyone," I replied, but my words sounded unconvincing even to myself. "Then prove it," he said with a slight smile. "Let me be closer." For a moment, I was at a loss. His assertiveness, his confidence, all of it simultaneously angered me and drew me to him. "Mateo," I began, but he quietly interrupted. "There are no buts, Olivia. Just you and me. And the ice that no longer separates us today." In that moment, I realized that I could no longer hide the obvious. I turned away, but made no attempt to retreat. His confidence was like a magnet, drawing me closer, even if my mind screamed at me that this was a dangerous game. "Mateo," I repeated, trying to make my voice steady, although a hurricane was raging inside. "You're used to getting everything you want, but I'm not someone you can easily conquer." His smile widened and he tilted his head, studying me with the same naked interest that always made me lose my balance. "And that's what wins me over," he said, running his fingers through his stubble. "You're a challenge. Something new that makes me try harder." "I'm not a toy, Mateo," I said, trying to keep my distance, at least emotionally, if I couldn't physically. "I know that, Olivia," he replied seriously, taking only a step back, but it was enough to make me breathe easier. "But somehow I feel like I need you more than I thought." His words threw me off balance. I expected him to be cocky, confident, and funny, but not this. His frankness caught me off guard. "Maybe you should stop talking in riddles," I blurted out, trying to pull myself together. He laughed, but there was no mockery in his laughter. It was a genuine, warm sound that, to my surprise, softened my guard a little. "Okay, Olivia," he said, looking at me as if he could see right through me. "Then let's keep it simple. I like being around you. And I want you to give me a chance to prove that this can be real." My heart sank. He was insistent, but there was an honesty in his words that left me wanting to argue. "Mateo," I began, but he held up a hand, stopping me. "Not now," he said quietly. "You don't have to answer right now. Just think about it." He took a step back, letting me feel free, but I saw a flicker of hesitation in his eyes, as if he were afraid I'd say no. "In the meantime, I'm going ice skating," he added with a playful smile. "Maybe you'd like to show me some of your signature tricks." I stood where I was, watching him walk away, his confident posture and easy movements drawing my gaze. Mateo Rodriguez. The man I promised myself I'd never let close had just punched a hole in my defenses. I tried to focus on my breathing, but my heart was still pounding like crazy. Mateo was breaking down all my defenses step by step, and the worst part was that I was letting him do it. I couldn't take my eyes off him as he effortlessly glided across the ice, performing simple elements, but with such grace and confidence that I wanted to catch myself wondering, what would it be like to be closer to him, to let his energy take over me completely? No, I snapped, clenching my hands into fists. It's just his charm. The magnet he turns on to get what he wants. And yet, something in his gaze, in the words he said, was haunting me. So, how was it? His voice suddenly pulled me out of my thoughts. Mateo was already standing next to me, slightly out of breath, with that same smile that made my knees weak like ice in the sun. Were you impressed? Not really, I snapped, lifting my chin defiantly. But maybe if you try a double axel, I'll change my mind. That sounds like a challenge, his eyes flashed with excitement. Just don't expect me to teach you, I added, crossing my arms over my chest, although somewhere deep inside I wanted to stay with him on this rink. Mateo smiled, and instead of answering, he suddenly grabbed my hand. His fingers burned my skin like hot coals. Then let's do it together, he suggested, pushing me to the center of the rink. You're not serious, I began, but he stopped me with a look, and the words stuck in my throat. What if I'm serious, he said, looking me straight in the eyes. Maybe I should take a chance, Olivia? His closeness was driving me crazy. My heart was pounding so loudly that I was sure he could hear it. I felt his strength, his confidence, his warmth. And something inside me trembled. I didn't have time to answer before he pulled me onto the ice. His hand held mine confidently, as if showing that I could trust him. We moved together, rhythmically and smoothly, as if we had been skating together all our lives. His breath was felt on my cheek, and at some point I realized that I didn't want to push him away anymore. Mateo suddenly turned to me, stopping just a few centimeters away. His arms wrapped around my waist, and this simple gesture blew up my whole world. Tell me you feel it, he whispered, looking straight into my eyes. My voice gave me away, trembling. Olivia, he ran his hand through my hair, and then leaned a little closer. I'd go crazy if I didn't know it was mutual. My defenses finally fell. I couldn't fight it anymore. With him. Instead of responding, I rose up on my toes, and our lips met. That kiss was everything: confusion, passion, desperation. It was a whirlwind that swirled us, leaving the rest of the world behind. The kiss was intense, like a whirlpool. His lips were hot, strong, but there was also tenderness in them, as if Mateo was trying to convey to me something much more than just a fleeting feeling. As if time had stopped, and there was nothing around us except the soft glide of the ice under his skates and our endless closeness. When I finally pulled away, my breath was ragged, like after the most difficult jump. Mateo looked at me, his gaze seemed to burn through me, making me forget about everything in the world. You don't understand what you just did, I breathed, shaking my head. Oh, I understand perfectly, his voice was low and husky, leaning down slightly so his face was level with mine. I've wanted this since the first day I saw you here. Since the first day? I tried to remain unimpressed, but my heart was beating like crazy again. You think I just came here on your time? He chuckled, running his hand down my waist. I was waiting for you to stop pushing me away, Olivia. But, why? You can have anyone, I murmured, feeling a hurricane of emotions raging inside me. And I want you. His voice became even quieter, but it only penetrated deeper into my soul. Your strength. Your stubbornness. Your passion. My legs started to shake, and I was sure it wasn't the ice. You don't even know me, I tried to force out, though the words came out weak. Then give me a chance to know you. He smiled slightly and gently ran his finger down my face, making me close my eyes at the barely perceptible touch. I didn't know how to respond. Everything inside me screamed that this was wrong. But damn, it felt so damn good. Mateo. I started, but he cut me off. You're not going to answer me now, he said, easily removing his hand, but his eyes never left mine. But you felt it, I know. And this is just the beginning. With that, he stepped back a little, leaving space between us, but it didn't lessen the tension in the air. See you later, Ice Queen, he added with a grin, turning and heading for the rink exit. I stood there, watching him go. This wasn't just a game, and I knew he wouldn't back down. And what did I want? The answer to that question was obvious, even if I wasn't ready to admit it to myself. A few days passed. On the ice, I was practicing my jumps again, trying not to think about Mateo. But it was impossible. His voice, his touch, his stubbornness, all of it had taken up residence in my head, displacing the calm I'd grown accustomed to. I realized he had invaded my world, which I'd built so carefully like an ice palace, and now it was all crumbling. Mateo no longer came to the rink when I was there. I thought it was for the best, but I felt empty. Maybe I really wanted him to continue to pursue me so persistently? The night before an important regional tournament, I was alone on the ice. Practice had ended and the rink was quiet. I closed my eyes, trying to focus, but instead I remembered my last moments with Mateo. I'm sure you'll win, but you look like you're hesitating, his voice pulled me out of my thoughts. I turned around abruptly. He was standing at the edge of the rink, leaning on the railing and looking straight at me. What are you doing here? I couldn't hide my surprise. I came to wish you luck. Although you hardly need it. I wanted to object, but instead I just shook my head. This is your main weapon, right? He continued, coming closer. Coldness. You think it will save you from feelings. But I see that you are alive, real. Don't be silly, Mateo. I turned away, feeling my cheeks burn. I want you to know that no matter what the outcome is tomorrow, I will be in the stands. I will be rooting for you. Why are you doing this? My voice wavered, and I could no longer pretend to be indifferent. Because I love you, Olivia, he said calmly, confidently, and the world around him froze. You can't love me. I took a step back. We are so different. Different? Maybe. But it doesn't matter. You want to drive me away, but you don't believe it yourself. Look me in the eyes and tell me that I'm wrong. I froze. Tell me? But how, if every word I could say was a lie? Instead of answering, I walked up to him. We stood a step away from each other. You make my life difficult, I whispered. And you make mine better, he leaned in, and our lips met again. This time it was not a challenge, not a game. It felt like a promise. The next day, I skated with a confidence I'd never felt before. Mateo sat in the stands, his eyes glued to me. I executed my triple axel, landing it perfectly, and raised my hand to finish. The applause filled the room, but for me, there was only one person whose reaction mattered. I looked for him in the crowd, and when our eyes met, I knew this was a victory not only on the ice, but in life. When the tournament ended, he was waiting for me backstage. I knew you could do it, he said, holding out a bouquet of snow-white roses. Thank you, I replied, smiling. And in that moment, I realized that he had become a part of me. The feelings I had been running from for so long finally caught up with me, and I no longer resisted. Together, we could overcome anything,